Throughout the early to mid-2010s, many teams tried to accomplish the ultimate goal of competing at NASCAR's highest level, the Cup Series. Whilst many had various levels of success, none of them had a level of poor results as RAB Racing. Of the 8 attempts to qualify, they DNQ'd every time. Was it a case of them having painfully poor luck? Or were they just painfully slow? Let's find out. Before I answer that, a little background information of the team. RAB Racing was owned by Robbie Benton. They competed in the then Nationwide Series, now Xfinity Series, between 2008 and 2015, as well as the Truck Series in 2012. Throughout this time, they had a wide variety of drivers, from Alex Bowman, the only driver to get a pole position for them, to Milkaduno. Yeah, fair to say they would take anyone at times. From their 220 nationwide races, they accumulated 2 poles, finished with 24 top 10s and 5 top 5. They shockingly won a race in 2010 with road ringer Boris Said. During their season in trucks, they had John West Townley compete in all races except one, being Daytona, where he was suspended due to a DUI. In this race, he was replaced by Travis Kvapil. Across this season, they got 3 top 10s and 1 top 5, being by Kvapil, where he finished 4th. Both their truck and nationwide programs would eventually shut down due to sponsorship issues. Anyway, let's move on to their Cup program. To begin their Cup program, we have to go back to 2012, where they tried to make their debut at that year's Daytona 500 with their Nationwide Series driver, Kenny Wallace. Whilst Kenny had some great success at Talladega, including famously coming second to Dale Earnhardt in 2000, his form at Daytona, especially at the 500, well, that's a whole other story. Across his 14 Daytona 500 attempts, Kenny had 4 previous DNQs, including 2 of his 3 most recent attempts. Of those he'd made, his best finish was only 16th in 2003. Also with the fact that he hadn't attempted a Cup race since 2008, they definitely had their backs against the wall. With 49 cars on the entry list, they had to beat 6 of their fellow go-or-go-homers to make the show. In practice, they started quite well, finishing the first 2 practice sessions in 25th and 27th. However, most importantly, they were the second best of the go-or-go-homers. So thus far, things were looking good for qualifying. To guarantee his spot, he had to qualify in the top 4 of the go-or-go-homers. In the session, he wound up qualifying 30th, which was the 4th best of the go-or-go-homers. Which should mean he's in, right? Wrong. Because at this time in the Cup Series, there was such thing as the past champions provisional, where the most recent champion would be able to use their provisional to get in. So that meant that they were the first car on the outside looking in. Due to him being in Heat 2, all he could do was sit and watch the first heat to see if Trevor or David could get him in. Shortly before halfway, Stremme made a decision to retire his car.
David Stremme has taken his Toyota to the garage, but Stremme will be in the 500 based on his qualifying speed from Sunday.
So all his hopes were then on Bain, who'd been one of the quickest all weekend. So all seemed to go to plan until, right near the end of the duel, Robbie Gordon, who earlier in the race had a smoking car, overtook Bain for the last transfer spot before a last lap yellow for a crash involving Danica Patrick.
Here we go. Here we go. Oh, hard in the wall. And she's all right.
This meant that only Tony Raines could help Kenny get in, without him having to get in himself. However, before the start, it was clear what Tony's plan was, and after 9 laps, Raines pulled into the garage. This meant it was all up to Kenny. However, shortly before halfway, Kenny reported of what was thought to be an engine or oil pressure issue. Due to this and an extended pit stop, Kenny wound up 21st, the last of the finishers. What was the end cause? I'll let Kenny explain.
What happened was something very unique. The new electronic fuel ignition is new. And why me? I don't care. I'm not going to complain or cry, me. But I just got on my phone this morning, Triad Motors just sent me a confirmation that I've been the very first driver to have computer software issues.
This was certainly a shame that such a small thing prevented these guys from competing in the 500. However, sadly, at the end of the day, that's just racing. Kenny Wallace would never attempt to make another cup race, and it would be over 2 years before we would see RAB return to the Cup Series. This time, they would once again try to qualify at Daytona. This time, they would instead try to make the July race with Joe Nemechek, another Cup Series veteran whom had been around Daytona that many times. He probably knew it like the back of his hand. Whilst in the past few seasons he'd basically been in a start and park role for his own team, Nemco Motorsports, he had always had a strong success at qualifying, including making the previous 4 Daytona 500s. However, to this stage, 2014 had meant a different story. In the 2 superspeedway races up to then, Nemechek had DNQ'd for both, so it was going to be a bit of an uphill battle to qualify. To make the job tougher, in the only practice session, they finished up 38th. Due to the qualifying rules, they had to finish in the top 36 in order to make the field. In qualifying, the team made an alliance with drivers from Joe Gibbs Racing to try and assist them in getting into the field. However, due to either traffic or team politics, they only finished 41st, well short of making the field. Their next attempt was at that year's Brickyard 400, with of all drivers, Matt Crafton. Now, don't get me wrong, he definitely had experience in the truck series, and he only competed in 4 nationwide races to that stage. Sure, 3 of them resulted in top 10s, but surely there were better drivers available, right? Anyway, let's move on to their weekend. In practice 1, they finished last, and in practice 2, they finished 44th. On both occasions, they were 1 second off the 36th quickest. And how did they go in qualifying? They finished last, 4 tenths slower than the second slowest driver, and over a second off making the field. I'd say this was the only race that I'd say they had no chance on making it, and I'd only guess that they even tried to run the race in the first place due to a sponsorship commitment. However, RAB weren't done for the year. They returned for the second Talladega race, once again with Joe Nemechek behind the wheel. I wasn't able to obtain how they went in practice 1, however in practice 2, they set a time in the top 10. Whilst admittedly, not everyone goes hard in practice, it certainly showed that in the draft they had pace. They just had to show it in quali. Unlike at Daytona, good old NASCAR changed the qualifying format to this. Yeah, long story short, it really didn't work too well for most of the big teams. As for Nemechek, they made the second round of qualifying and finished 24th, which should mean they finally made their first race, right? Well, that wasn't until in post-qualifying tech they were found to have an improperly installed oil tank encasement. What was the punishment? Disqualification from qualifying, which of course meant yet another DNQ. Was this punishment harsh? Probably. Yeah, at the end of the day, rules are rules. I wasn't able to obtain any further details on how it was found or how it was improperly installed. I just hope that it wasn't done intentionally. This also meant that for the first time in his Cup Series career, Joe Nemechek failed to make any of the superspeedway races in a Cup season. In 2015, RAB returned to once again attempt to make the Daytona 500, this time with Justin Marks driving. In the 2 practice sessions, he finished 33rd and 23rd. Like Talladega, if they stayed in the draft, they had the pace. In a rather controversial qualifying session that revolved around an incident with Reed Sorensen and Clint Boyer, Marks finished qualifying in 43rd, which put them once again in a go or go home position. In the 3 practice sessions between qualifying and the duels, they continued to show speed by finishing 12th and 9th. They skipped practice 5 like almost everyone else in the field. In the duel, it was quite an anticlimactic run. They ran at the back of the pack for the majority of the duel, and they finished 18th, just short of making the field. Their remaining 3 attempts were done by Reed Sorensen. Starting in Atlanta. In the one and only practice session, they finished 37th, just under 200ths of 36th. So if all went to plan, they might have been able to sneak in. Until qualifying was delayed 20 minutes due to a high amount of vehicles having issues getting through tech inspection. However, much to the behest of some teams, qualifying eventually went ahead and 13 cars were unable to make a time. The 29 team was one of them. As a result, they were too low in owner points to make the race. They then attempted the next race, Las Vegas, where they finished 41st in practice, nearly half a second off 36th. So once again, their backs were against the wall. In qualifying, the pace didn't improve, and they set the 43rd quickest time, roughly 5.5 tenths off the 36th fastest time. Due to sponsorship, as well as points position, RAB made the decision to skip the next race at Phoenix to focus on trying to make the following race at Auto Club. With only 45 cars on the entry list, this gave the 29 team the best chance to finally make the field. However, signs were once again not looking good. In the only practice session, they finished 42nd, roughly 2.5 tenths off the top 36. In qualifying, they sadly once again ended up 42nd, 5.5 tenths off the 36th quickest. So for the 8th and final time, this resulted in yet another DNQ. Sadly, after this, the unfortunate no sponsorship bug struck the team, and the team shut down. So what happened to the team after this? Well, it seems like some of the equipment ended up with Gaunt Brothers Racing, who entered a partnership with RAB Racing for the 2017 Daytona 500, where they were able to make the race. However, they finished 36th after being caught up in a wreck. This partnership continued on for Gaunt's later run at Talladega, where they sadly DNQ'd. So that's the story of RAB Racing. Overall, I wouldn't say they were incredibly slow, as outside of their Indy attempt, they were always quicker than someone who would actually make the show. However, whilst some attempts, such as their Daytona or Atlanta runs, just didn't go their way, I wouldn't say it's all down to poor luck either, as it seemed the Talladega issue might have been their own doing, but as I've said, I can't confirm that at this stage. Overall, unfortunately, at the end of the day, that's just how racing is sometimes. So that wraps up this video. I am planning on this potentially becoming a series. At this stage, I have one other team in mind. However, if you have any further suggestions, feel free to comment them below, and I may include them in a future video. Like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter @TheShardyGuy and EdgeGale1718. Thank you all for watching. See you all in the next video.